They told you it was anxiety, but what if it was assigned? What if what you feel was sent? A former insider is breaking silence, and what he reveals will shake you. Why do attacks come suddenly, without warning, without reason? Who benefits when you stay confused, medicated, and spiritually blind? Tonight, the hidden system is exposed, and you will never see your struggle the same again. He sat in silence for years, watching, listening, participating, not as a victim, but as a willing instrument. A former Satanist, trained not just in rituals, but in targeted spiritual attacks. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't vague, it wasn't symbolic, it was precise. He said, "We didn't just attack randomly, we assigned, let that sink in." He revealed that believers, especially those with spiritual sensitivity, those who prayed, those who carried purpose, were not ignored. They were marked, not with something you could see, not with something doctors could scan, but with something that manifested in the mind. He said the strategy was simple but devastating. Don't always destroy the body. Confuse the mind. Because once the mind is unstable, the spirit becomes silent. And when the spirit is silent, the assignment succeeds. You thought that sudden wave of fear came from nowhere. You thought that racing heartbeat, that tight chest, that overwhelming dread was just your brain misfiring. But what if it was introduced? He described rituals where names were spoken. Specific names, not crowds, not groups, individuals. And when those names were spoken, something was released. Not imagination, not emotion, but entities assigned to whisper, not loud voices, subtle suggestions. What if something bad happens? You're not okay. You're losing control. And slowly, what started as a whisper became a pattern, then a cycle, then a diagnosis. Anxiety, that's what they call it. But he said, we celebrated when it reached that stage, because once it had a label, it lost its suspicion. Once it had a medical name, it stopped being spiritually questioned. And that was the cover. You need to hear this clearly. Not every battle you face is chemical. Not every heaviness you feel is natural. Some of it is strategic. He described late night attacks, moments when the body is tired, defenses are low, and the mind is open. That's when it intensifies. Sudden fear before sleep, unexplained dread, a feeling like something is wrong, but you can't explain what. He said, we targeted the night because that's when resistance is weakest. You've been there, lying down, trying to rest, and suddenly your thoughts turn against you. Your heart races, your breathing shifts, your peace disappears, and you ask yourself, why now? Now you know, because timing is part of the assignment. He revealed that not everyone is targeted the same way. Some are hit with fear, others with intrusive thoughts, others with overwhelming pressure, like something is sitting on their chest. Different methods, same goal. Disruption, disconnection, silence your prayer, interrupt your focus, weaken your authority. Because if you ever fully step into who you are, the access is threatened. So the attack isn't random, it's preventative. You were never supposed to stay confused this long. But confusion is the weapon, he said. If they ever realize it's not just them, they'll fight back. And that's what they feared, awareness. Because awareness breaks agreement, and agreement is how the assignment sustains. When you believe it's just you, you stop resisting. When you think it's just your mind, you accept it. And when you accept it, it stays. But the moment you question it, the moment you resist it, the moment you say, this is not mine, something shifts. He said that's when we noticed interference. Interference, when believers started praying, not casually, but with authority. Not begging, but commanding. That's when the pattern broke. Because the assignment was never designed to withstand resistance, only ignorance. You've been told to manage it, control it, live with it. But what if you were never meant to carry it at all? He exposed something even deeper. Entry points. Moments when doors were opened, not always through sin. Sometimes through trauma, sometimes through fear, sometimes through prolonged stress. Moments when your guard was down and something slipped in. And from that moment, the pattern began. He said, we didn't need full access, just a small opening, a thought, a moment, a vulnerability. And from there, it grew. You need to understand this. The battle isn't always visible, but it is real. And ignoring it doesn't make it disappear, it makes it stronger. He wasn't proud when he spoke. His voice carried weight, regret, because he knew people suffered without knowing why. They blamed themselves. They questioned their faith. They thought they were broken. But the truth was, they were targeted. And now you're hearing it not to create fear, but to expose the strategy. Because once you see the pattern, you can break it. Once you recognize the voice, you can reject it. Once you understand the assignment, you can cancel it. This is where it begins, not with panic, but with awareness, not with fear, but with authority. You are not powerless. You were never the source of this, and what was assigned can be removed. He leaned forward and his voice dropped, because what he said next was not just exposure, it was strategy. He said, "We studied believers more than they studied themselves. Every habit, every weakness, every moment of inconsistency, nothing was random." He revealed that the attacks didn't begin in chaos. They began with observation, watching when you prayed, watching when you stopped, watching what triggered your fear, watching what drained your strength. Because once a pattern was found, an entry was planned. You thought your worst moments were accidents. He said, "No moments when you felt overwhelmed, moments when you felt rejected, moments when your guard dropped, even for a second. That's when something was introduced, not a loud attack, not something obvious, something subtle. A thought that didn't feel like yours but sounded like you. You're not strong enough. Something is wrong with you. You're about to lose control." And you didn't reject it because it felt familiar. That was the deception, familiarity. He said, "If it feels like them, they won't fight it." And that's how the cycle deepened. Because once a thought is accepted, it becomes a belief. Once a belief is repeated, it becomes a stronghold. And once it becomes a stronghold, it starts controlling your reactions. You don't even question it anymore. You just respond. That's why the anxiety feels automatic, because it's been trained, conditioned, reinforced over time. He exposed something chilling, triggers. He said, "We attached reactions to specific moments, certain places, certain times of day, certain memories, even certain people. So when you entered that environment or remembered that moment, the reaction activated. Your heart rate increased, your thoughts accelerated, your peace vanished, and you thought, here it is again." But it wasn't random, it was programmed. You need to hear this. Not everything that repeats is natural. Some cycles are reinforced intentionally. He described how even your body can be used against you. Physical sensations, tight chest, shaking hands, short breath, not always caused by something physical, but triggered by something spiritual. Because once your body reacts, your mind follows. And once your mind follows, the fear becomes real to you, even if the source was never natural. He said, "We didn't need to stay visible, we just needed the reaction to stay active." So the assignment continued even when no ritual was happening, because now it was inside the pattern, inside your routine, inside your expectations. You began anticipating the attack, and anticipation strengthened it. That's how deep it went. He revealed that isolation was one of their strongest tools. Not always physical isolation, but emotional. Spiritual, you could be surrounded by people and still feel alone, still feel misunderstood, still feel like no one could explain what you were going through. And in that isolation, the thoughts became louder because there was no interruption, no challenge, no resistance. He said, isolation gives the assignment a voice. You stopped talking about it because people didn't understand, or they dismissed it, or they labeled it. So you carried it alone. And in silence, it grew. But then he said something that shifted everything. He said, the moment a believer spoke against it, we felt resistance, not emotion, not effort, authority, because there's a difference between reacting to fear and confronting it. You were never meant to just endure this. You were meant to confront it. But no one told you that. You were told to cope, manage, live with it. But he said, we feared the ones who refused to agree with it. Those who didn't say, this is my anxiety, but instead said, this is not mine. That shift broke something, because agreement is what gives it permission. And when you withdraw agreement, the hold weakens. He described moments where believers would suddenly interrupt the pattern, right in the middle of an attack. Instead of panicking, they spoke, not softly, not passively, but directly. And the reaction changed. The intensity dropped. the cycle broke, the pattern interrupted. And he said, that's when we lost ground. Because the assignment depends on continuation, on repetition, on cycles that never get challenged. But once challenged, it starts collapsing. You need to understand what you've been doing. Every time you accepted it as yours, you strengthened it. Every time you feared it, you fed it. Every time you expected it, you prepared space for it. But that stops now, because now you see it. Now you recognize the pattern. Now you understand the strategy. And once strategy is exposed, it can be defeated. He didn't stop there. He revealed that even distractions were used, overthinking, mental noise, endless loops of thoughts that never settle. Because if your mind is always occupied, you never focus enough to resist. You stay tired, drained, mentally exhausted. And exhaustion lowers resistance. That's why it feels like you can't think clearly sometimes, like your mind is working against you, because in a way it has been influenced, but not owned, never owned. Because if it was owned, you wouldn't be fighting. The fact that you feel the conflict means something inside you is resisting. And that resistance is where your authority lives. He said, we avoided those who became aware, because awareness leads to action, and action breaks patterns. And patterns are the foundation of the assignment. You were never supposed to stay in this cycle. You were never meant to normalize it. You were never created to live under it. And now you're starting to see why this is not just about what you feel. It's about what has been influencing what you feel. And now that it's exposed, you have a choice. Continue the pattern or break it. He paused longer this time, because what he was about to reveal was the part they never wanted exposed. Not the attack, not the assignment, but the legal ground. He said, we didn't just send, we looked for permission. Permission, that's the word that changes everything. Because nothing stayed without a reason. Nothing remained without access. He explained that many believers were not overpowered. They were unaware of what they had allowed. Not intentionally, not knowingly, but gradually. He said, small agreements opened larger doors. A moment of fear you entertained. A lie you repeated about yourself. A wound you never released. A pattern you never questioned. Each one, a thread. Over time, those threads formed a rope, not to bind your body, but to influence your mind. You thought it was just a phase, just stress, just something you would eventually grow out of. But while you ignored it, it rooted deeper. He revealed something even more unsettling. Words, the things you say, especially in your lowest moments. I can't handle this. I'm losing my mind. This is just who I am now. He said, those weren't just expressions, those were agreements. And every agreement reinforced the assignment, because words carry alignment. And alignment determines authority. If your words align with the attack, you empower it. If your words oppose it, you weaken it. That's why the battle intensified when you spoke negatively. Not because you were weak, but because your authority was being redirected. He said, we listened more than we attacked, waiting for what you would say, waiting for what you would accept, waiting for what you would declare over yourself. Because once you said it, they didn't have to force it anymore. It sustained itself. This is where many lost the fight without even realizing they were in one. You need to hear this clearly. Silence can be dangerous, but agreement is more dangerous. He exposed how unforgiveness played a role. Not just anger, not just pain, but unresolved wounds. Moments you replay, people you can't release, situations you revisit in your mind over and over again. He said, those moments kept doors open. Because every time you relived it, you reopened the access point, and the assignment stayed active. Not because it was strong, but because the door was never closed. You were never taught that healing is spiritual warfare, that releasing is authority, that letting go is resistance. So you held on. And in holding on, the cycle held on to you. But then he said something that shifted everything again. He said, the moment they forgave, we lost access. Instantly, not gradually, not slowly, immediately. Because forgiveness broke the agreement, and once the agreement was broken, the assignment had nothing to hold on to. You need to understand the weight of that. This isn't just about feelings. This is about access points, legal ground, spiritual alignment. He revealed that fear itself was often the gateway. Not just the attack, but the reaction to the attack. Because fear says, this has power over me, then that statement gives it influence. But when fear is confronted, when it is denied authority, when it is replaced with truth, something shifts. He said, we avoided those who refused to fear, not because they never felt it, but because they didn't submit to it. There's a difference. Feeling fear is not the problem. Submitting to it is where the ground is given. You felt it, but you didn't know what to do with it. So you accepted it. And acceptance became agreement, but now you're seeing it differently. He also revealed something about environments, places that carried certain atmospheres, not always obvious, not always visible, but heavy, draining, oppressive. He said, some environments amplified the assignment because of what had been done there, what had been spoken there, what had been allowed there. And when you stayed in those environments, the attacks intensified. Not because you were weak, but because the atmosphere supported it. You've walked into places before and suddenly felt uneasy, restless, unsettled. Now you understand why. Discernment was trying to alert you, but you dismissed it because you didn't have language for it. Now you do. He said, the strongest believers were not the loudest, they were the most aware. Aware of their thoughts, aware of their words, aware of their environments, aware of what they allowed and what they rejected. Because awareness closes doors, and closed doors stop assignments. You've been trying to fight something without knowing where it was entering, but now it's being exposed. This is not about blaming yourself. This is about reclaiming authority. Because what was opened can be closed. What was agreed with can be revoked. What was assigned can be cancelled. But it starts here, with recognition, with responsibility, with a decision. You can no longer say do. And what you do next determines everything. He looked directly ahead, as if he was no longer remembering the past, but warning the future. Because this part was not about what they did, it was about what you must do now. He said, exposure without action changes nothing. You've heard the strategy, you've seen the pattern, you've recognized the entry points. But if nothing shifts after this, the cycle continues. He made it clear. Breaking the assignment is not passive, it is deliberate, it is intentional, it is forceful. Because what was sent does not leave because you ignore it, it leaves when you confront it. He said, the ones who broke free were not the ones who understood the most, but the ones who acted. Action, not emotion, not feeling, not waiting for it to go away, but standing in the middle of the attack and responding with authority. He described the moment that stayed with him. A believer under intense pressure, heart racing, thoughts spiraling, fear rising, everything pointing toward another collapse. But this time, something changed. Instead of surrendering, they spoke out loud, clear, direct, this is not mine. And something shifted immediately. Not because the feeling vanished in a second, but because the authority shifted. He said, that moment broke the cycle, because for the first time, the assignment was resisted instead of accepted. You need to understand this deeply. Your silence has been working against you, not because you are weak, but because you were never taught to speak. But your voice is not just expression, it is a weapon. Every time you declare truth, you realign your authority. Every time you reject the lie, you weaken the influence. Every time you stand your ground, you reclaim territory. He said, we lost ground when they became consistent, not occasional resistance, not one strong moment followed by silence, but consistency, daily, intentional, focused, because consistency breaks patterns, and patterns are what sustain the assignment. He revealed that your routine matters more than your reaction. What you do daily determines what has access. Moments of clarity are powerful, but habits are transformative. He said, those who built spiritual discipline became untouchable. Not perfect, not flawless, but grounded, stable. Aware, they didn't wait for attacks to respond. They positioned themselves before the attack even came. You've been reacting. Now you must start preparing. He described simple but powerful shifts, guarding your thoughts, not entertaining every idea that enters your mind. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every feeling deserves your agreement. You must become selective, intentional. He said the mind is a battlefield but also a gate, and you decide what passes through. You've been letting everything in and then wondering why it overwhelms you. But now you take control. You filter, you reject, you replace. He revealed that speaking truth is not enough you must also believe it. Because words without belief weaken quickly. But words aligned with conviction carry authority. That's why doubt has been used against you, to make you question your own power, to make you hesitate, to make you stay silent. But hesitation gives time, strengthens the attack, so you must move decisively. He said, delayed resistance is weakened resistance. When it starts, you respond immediately, not later, not after it grows, but at the first sign. That's how patterns are broken, early, decisively. He also emphasized separation. Not everything needs to stay in your life. Certain environments, certain influences, certain patterns, if they feed the cycle, they must be removed. You cannot expect freedom while maintaining what strengthens the attack. That's not discipline, that's contradiction. He said, freedom requires alignment. What you say, what you think, what you allow must all align, because misalignment creates gaps, and gaps create access. He revealed one final truth. He said, we feared those who knew who they were. Identity, not just belief, not just knowledge, but identity. Because when you know who you are, you stop negotiating with what you're not. You stop tolerating what doesn't belong. You stop accepting what was never assigned to you by truth. And that ends the cycle. You've been questioning yourself, doubting yourself, blaming yourself. But now you see it differently. You were never the source. You were the target. But being targeted does not mean being defeated. Because now you're aware. Now you're ready. And what once controlled you is about to lose its hold. This ends now. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. You are not under this, you are over it. What was sent against you is breaking in this moment. Your mind is not a prison, it is your ground of authority. Stand up, speak, and take back what was never meant to be lost. This is your turning point, and you will not go back.